It seems like the baby has something to say. My 8-year-old niece glanced at me and said, "Can you tell me what the baby is saying?" My niece replied cheerfully, "Yes," and began to say ridiculous things one after another. Amidst the bustling relatives, my husband, with a pale face, trembled slightly. It's no wonder, as my niece managed to guess an outrageous plan that only my husband should have known about. And I clenched my fists tightly, trembling with anger. I'm Tamara, a 24-year-old stay-at-home mom. I married my husband, Norman, who is 2 years older than me, and 1.5 years ago, and had a son, Colin. Every day, I was busy with unfamiliar childcare, but I lived happily with my family of 3. My sister and her husband who live in the neighborhood often come to visit my house, and since I was pregnant, they have helped me with housework and have been a reassuring presence to talk to. When I was talking to my sister, I heard something surprising from her. That is, my 8-year-old niece Sage has a mysterious power. One day, when my sister was out by car with her niece, Sage said, "If you go this way, you should go that way because you will have an accident," so my sister changed course to the road pointed by her niece just in case. Then, he said that he learned from the news that a large-scale accident involving several cars occurred on the road that he was supposed to pass the next day. My sister was horrified to think that she had gone the usual way without believing Sage's story at that time. In addition to that, there were times when she predicted that a thief would enter the house next door, and it turned out to be true. The neighbor, who was persuaded by my sister in advance, took her valuables and evacuated to her parents' house that day, so there was no damage. However, as I am not good at the occult, I was scared when I heard about my sister's story, and I didn't believe that my niece had magical powers. I told my husband about my niece, but he didn't take it seriously and said, "Wow, that's amazing." From the time I was pregnant, my husband got drunk and came home in the morning more and more. When a child is born and becomes a father, Norman will surely change. I was expecting that, but even after giving birth, my husband didn't change anything. When we have children, let's raise him together. As if Norman's words were an illusion, after giving birth, he left all childcare to me. Moreover, there are often occasions where just as we've finally managed to put our son to sleep, he wakes up again due to the loud, drunken exclamations of my husband, declaring, "I'm home." I end up holding Colin, who is crying, and continue to comfort him. "Hey, Norman, Colin is going to wake up, so can you come home a little sooner? I have a business relationship, so I can't help it. Who do you think you owe your life to? Don't complain." Upon hearing my husband's yelling, my son starts to cry even harder. "Shut up. You're his mother, so silence Colin already." I snapped at that one word, but I couldn't talk to my husband, who was drunk and upset, so I had no choice but to go to the bedroom and put my son to bed without saying anything back. 2 weeks later, on my husband's day off, my sister and niece came to see our son for the first time. Looking at Colin, my niece seemed to be mellow, saying, "Wow, it's small and cute," but after a while, she began to glance at my husband. "Sage, what's wrong?" "Hey Tamara, it seems like the baby has something to say." Sage said, "Don't tell Norman," and secretly whispered to me. I was so surprised to hear the contents that I was speechless and involuntarily stared at my husband. My husband, who doesn't know anything, is stunned. But the baby can't talk about anything yet. It's true, that's what he's saying. But I don't want to be separated from my mommy, so I'm telling you to be careful with your daddy. I couldn't believe what it was all about, but it bothered me because my niece had tears in her eyes and a very serious face. So, when I asked my husband after my sister and niece left, "Is there anything you are hiding from me?" he immediately denied it. "Why do you suddenly say that?" "What?" I just asked. "Don't worry, I'm not hiding anything, and I'm not doing anything to worry you." "All right, I understand." However, despite his words, his eyes are swimming with suspicion, clearly indicating his dubious attitude. And my husband started changing my son's diaper, which he usually never does, so I felt more and more uncomfortable. Maybe Norman is hiding something from me. I couldn't get the strange words that Sage said to me out of my head, and I started to feel uncomfortable with my husband. The next day, after my husband went to work, my sister and niece suddenly came to our house. "Sorry for dropping in so suddenly. Sage just suddenly insisted on going to Tamara's place." My sister looked sorry, but my niece's expression was serious. "Don't apologize to me, sister. Sage, come on. Please come inside." When I said that, my niece took off her shoes and went into the house, looking lovingly at Colin sleeping in his crib. But while I was preparing drinks in the kitchen, I noticed that my niece had gone to my husband's study and was staring at one thing. "Sage, what's wrong?" "Tamara, it's hidden here." "What?" When my niece pointed to her husband's bookshelf, I found his diary and a certain document hidden between the books. I didn't know that my husband kept a diary, but I was curious about it and looked inside, even though I thought it was bad. There was a vivid description of the ridiculous plan that my husband was secretly planning. I didn't think he was thinking of this. I was scared, my hands were shaking, and I was finally convinced that Sage's magical powers that my sister had told me about were true. When I showed the diary to my sister, she was surprised but gently shook my hand, saying, "It's okay, I'll protect you, Tamara. I'm worried about Tamara, so can I visit you with Sage every time Norman takes a holiday?" "Of course, thank you, sister." As soon as I felt reassured and relieved by my sister, tears began to spill out. My niece looks up at me with concern. "Sister, I'm sorry I doubted you until now. Sage's words were true. That's why I told you, but I'm really glad it happened before it got too bad." "Yes, thanks to Sage." "Thank you." "No, not at all. You're welcome." I smiled back at my niece, who was smiling shyly, but in my heart, I felt my love for my husband turn into hatred one after another. "I'm sorry, I can't go on like this, I'll get my revenge." With that in mind, I decided to take revenge on my husband in a flashy way at the first meal of my son's meal, which was attended by both parents. After that, my sister and niece came to my house every time my husband was on holiday. At first, my husband behaved amiably, but gradually he began to have a grumpy attitude. Eventually, despite having an older sister and a niece, my husband wanted to go out to be alone with me. "Sister-in-law, could you please take care of Colin until we come back? We'd like to have a date as a couple once in a while." "Don't do it, Norman, Colin would cry all the time without mommy." "But sometimes Tamara needs a change of pace too. Just breathing in some fresh air can be refreshing, don't you think?" "Well, in that case, there's no need to go out. Why don't you two just go out to the garden and breathe some fresh air?" It's such nice weather today, I'm sure it'll be pleasant. My sister always argues well so as not to spoil my husband's mood, so he can't seem to say anything back. That's when I started to feel like my husband was always irritable. Finally, Colin's first meal day arrived. On that day, my parents, my sister, her husband, and my parents-in-law gathered at my house to celebrate my son. Colin, look here. He's so cute. My father-in-law looked happy to see my husband who shot a video while smiling. My son looked happy to be surrounded by everyone. After the first meal, we decided to have a dinner party together. In a friendly atmosphere while drinking, my niece stared at my son without eating. Look, it's Sage's favorite orange juice. My sister tries to distract my niece, but Sage doesn't respond. I wonder if she's feeling something again. At that time, I was worried. Does Norman like money more than Tamara? With those words directed at my husband by my niece, the lively atmosphere that had filled the room instantly quieted down. Everyone froze, their gaze fixed on Sage. Sage, why do you say that? Because the baby is telling you. I couldn't help but look at my sister, but everyone else seemed to be as confused as ever. Hey, Sage, Colin can't talk yet, you can't lie like that, right? My husband, who was sitting next to Daisy, chuckled and placed his hand on her head, but she forcefully pushed it away. It's not a lie, it's a baby saying, Daddy is trying to get money by pushing Mommy from a high place. Me? No way. I wouldn't do such a thing, right? Colin says, I love Mommy, so Daddy please stop. Everyone who heard Sage's words was stunned. Among them, only my husband turned pale and his lips began to tremble like a trap. Don't mess around. Stop saying nonsense. Suddenly, the furious husband slammed the table hard, causing Daisy's face to contort, and my son started to look like he was about to cry. I wanted to keep things peaceful until the meal was over, but it seems impossible now. I looked at my husband with cold eyes. So you were getting involved with strippers and inflating company expenses, weren't you? Oh, what are you talking about? I confronted my husband, whose eyes were darting around, with the diary I found on the bookshelf. It's written right here, are you going to say no? Oh, that's a subordinate of the company. There's no way I'm going to do something stupid like that, right? There was a lot of sweat on the forehead of my husband, who was making painful excuses with a twitchy smile. Well, it's a violation of privacy to look at people's diaries without permission. There's no reason for you to blame me for that. Huh? What do you mean? You're still going to blurt out, you've got a terrible plan to do something about it before it gets caught. I opened the page of the diary in which the crime plan was written and held it in front of me, and he looked away. That's the story I got when I decided to write a novel. Besides, a mere diary is not proof of anything. Oh, yes, so you can say that when you look at this. I pulled out a document. You know what, the life insurance policy you hid. What were you going to do with me insuring $10 million? Oh, that's it. You tried to repay the embezzled expenses with the insurance money you obtained after you made me into a scapegoat. Isn't this solid evidence? No, that is. In fact, it was all that my niece told me when she secretly whispered to me in my ear when she came to see my son for the first time that day. Norman wants money, so he's trying to take Tamara to a higher place and push you from behind. From the moment I heard those words, I couldn't believe my husband. My parents-in-law and my parents are also looking at this situation with surprised faces. He was cornered by me, and he couldn't say anything back, but suddenly he sat down on the ground, clinging to my leg. Tamara, I'm sorry, let me pay back the embezzled company money instead. Why do I have to do that? Don't say that, we're a couple, aren't we? If the company finds out, I'll be fired. You can't live like that, can you? My husband who took my life lightly for his own self-preservation. I bitterly regretted why I ended up with such a person. I can't be married to a horrible person like you anymore, and it's bad for Colin, so let's divorce. I confronted my husband with the completed divorce papers and demanded $20,000 in alimony and $500 per month as child support. No way. Colin is still young, you know. Divorcing and then paying such a large sum of money is no joke. Enough with the excuses, just sign the divorce papers already. I feel nauseated witnessing my husband's pitiful state, stomping his feet like a child, crying and screaming, no. Then, my father-in-law, who had been silent until then, shouted at my husband, Norman. Enough already. I'm sure as a father, he couldn't bear to witness his son's disgraceful behavior any longer. And my husband, who was told by his father-in-law, you have no right to refuse divorce and alimony, reluctantly signed the divorce papers. Then my parents-in-law repeatedly apologized to me and dragged my husband out of the house. The next day, I filed divorce papers at the government office. I contacted my ex-husband's company and reported that he was misusing the company's expenses. Afterward, my ex-husband's wrongdoing came to light, and he was fired from the company. The ex-husband sold his home to pay alimony, child support, and compensation to the company, and now he is working from morning to night as a live-in civil engineering worker. I thought about reporting this to the police, but there is no evidence other than what my husband wrote in his diary. Rather, I decided to be glad that I was able to prevent it thanks to my niece and son. And now I am back at my parents' house with my son, and I am living a peaceful life. My sister and niece came to see my son almost every day, and Sage's words made me smile. Colin says he's happy to be with his mom all the time. As I watched my son laugh and smile, I vowed to continue to pour plenty of love and protect him with my hands.